Hi, everyone, and welcome in to Don't Tell Me How to Fan. My name is Josh Albrecht. With me is, as always, is John Taylor. John, how we doing?
I'm doing great. Excited for today's episode. We have a very special guest.
We sure do. Andrew Snyder, friend of the Eurostep Network and knower of ball. Baseball, that is. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us.
Josh, John, day one listener, first time caller. So I'm thrilled to be here to chat ball with you guys. Truly thrilling. Thanks for having me on your program.
And we need to explain to people how difficult it is to call into a podcast. And yet Andrew found a way. He did it. Dude, it's awesome to have you on and talk about some Brewers baseball, especially because it's something to look forward to when the rest of Wisconsin sports right now are kind of uncertain. And we don't really know what's going to happen with the Brewers, but we know that we can be optimistic about it because there's a lot of good things happening. And right now they're down in Maryvale for spring training. So let's kind of start there as they go through and what you've seen so far in spring training. Kind of give us your overall thoughts so far. Where's your head at, Andrew, and when it comes to the Brewers at this point in spring training?
Yeah, so I think spring is great because every team that knows they're going to be at least in contention can kind of dream on everything and view everything in the most positive light, most positive outcome. And I think that's what the Brewers are doing. Veterans are just getting into playing shape. I mean, guys like Brandon Woodruff ramping their way up. Christian Yelich doesn't play in his first game until like week 3 of spring training every season. He just wants to be healthy. And then you've got guys who are just settling in right before they go off to play for their nations in the WBC World Baseball Classic, something that, everyone's been looking forward to through the last few seasons, and the Brewers have a lot of representation there. So for Brewers fans, there's just so much you can look to. You can listen to a game in the background on the radio. You can stream a game, getting to hear Jeff Levering. I know he's a friend of your program, Rock, and Vinny Rotino and Sophia getting back on the action. So it really is just everything that spring represents is represented in spring training baseball. So for the Brewers, it's just making sure everyone's healthy and ready to go from day one, dreaming on the prospects, and really just keeping 2025 rolling into 2026, even with the changes.
Okay, but is that something that I forget every year, that spring training is about being healthy? Because when, on the morning show that I do on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network, Inside Wisconsin Sports, Trevor and Josh, we talked to Jeff Levering and Lane Grindle, and both of them were like, we just want everyone to come out of camp healthy. And I was like, wait a minute. Well, I don't remember us constantly talking about that at spring training. I thought it was about who looks good and who's ready to go and who improved and what prospects are going to be guys we need to watch. And they both highlighted health. And then they start talking to guys in the locker room, and they're like, well, look, the most important thing is that I can give everything to the team this year and I can be healthy. And Brandon Woodruff saying, so if that means that I'm not the starter on opening day, so be it. And I'm going, was I living in a completely different reality where we didn't worry about health in spring training? Apparently so, because this is a thing we deal with every year.
It's funny that you bring that up because I was actually on my lunch break today. I was taking a walk. I was going to get some Gatorade because as a man in my mid-30s, sometimes I need to hydrate even though I don't play professional sport. Yes. I was just thinking about the Woodruff conversation about whether or not he'll be ready. And then I saw it again with Quinn Priester. And it just really reminded me that we are in a different era in terms of starting pitching. So you make a great point because it's now about health. It's being ready for the long run rather than plug and play, give us your 200 innings. We know you're ready to go from day one. So it's like more than ever. Back in the day, guys were playing themselves into physical shape in terms of they were sitting on the couch drinking beer all off season and they actually have to, be able to get their wind sprints in. And now it's like, is my arm going to fall off in June? Let's make sure that doesn't happen. So it's like medical science is taking us to a point where it's like we know too much. So that's topic of conversation 1.
Yeah, I also want to hop in and just say that I feel like it's probably as annoying as to talk about health. We're in like a way better spot this year than we were last year, right? Where we were going in saying like in the 2024 season, they pitched 19 starters. Like we need to figure this out. And then they're scrambling to deal for Quentin Priester pretty quickly in short order. And they signed Jose Quintana pretty late. So, it's not great that we can already kind of pencil out Brandon Woodruff and Quentin Priester potentially for the opening day roster. But, with their simulated games and the way everyone's talking about it, it's like they don't care about the numbers. They're not interested in, the wins and losses. They just want to see good reps, positive outcomes in terms of those simulated games. And so I feel much better about where this team is going to be pitching probably after the first month of it than heading into the first part of the season. And that feels pretty good, right?
Well, it's hard to feel worse. I feel like that's part of it too, is that we have a little bit of we remember last year, and it's scarred us because remember, we came out the gate, we being the Brewers. Yes, I say we. Okay. Don't tell me I'm a fan. And they get smoked by the Yankees. We're like, okay, the sky's falling immediately. And then how long did it take us to where we were waiting to get pitchers back? It was the beginning of last season. People don't remember through these 97 wins. The beginning of the season was a lot of, we just have to survive. We have these guys. They're in AAA. They're recovering. They're getting back to we had to wait for a while. And so I think part of hearing the pitchers talk like that in spring training kind of gets me like nervous right away, going, no, please not this again. We can't have this again. I understand it's important how we finish, but I also don't want to start this season like we did last season of not feeling confident that we're going to have any of these guys. I don't like that.
Well, that leads into, I would say, like my first big question is, do you feel like, Andrew, there's been any like big standouts in terms of, pitchers coming into spring training or obviously our newly acquired guys? I know at the time of the recording, the Brewers and the Cubs played Yelly on his debut in spring training in a home run, which was awesome. But I know that Pat Murphy was pretty effusive with his praise of Sprout, and he feels like he's going to be around. And obviously, we acquired a bunch of new pitchers off of that Peralta trade. Anything in particular that you're feeling like will help solve some of these issues if Woodruff and Priester can't start right away?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the new additions that were acquired because of the Freddie Peralta trade and then the Caleb Durbin trade. The big standouts of spring training so far have been, on the pitching side, have been guys like Brandon Sproat. Sproat's been up to, I think, 97 with his sinker early. Obviously, you're getting these shorter stints, so it's going to, pop a little bit more as they work themselves into going deeper and turning over in a lineup multiple times. But he looks like he's going to be pretty nasty. He's got a change-up sinker cutter combo. And I think in the past he threw a sweeper, but the Brewers don't typically teach guys sweepers, so I don't know if they would prioritize that if that wasn't his pitch mix. You also look at Shane Johan, who Pat Murphy commented on at one point in the recent days and said he's a guy who's been impressive and will get out to the big league level this year. It might be in a multi-inning reliever role early on if they've got enough pitching depth and the starting pitchers stay healthy. And then you talk about Kyle Harrison, who was the headliner in the Caleb Durbin deal. He came out today that he had been playing around with a kick changeup grip for the Red Sox last season, wasn't able to really get a handle on it. In talking with a former Giants teammate over the winter, he seemed to figure out a grip that worked for him, and that's something the Brewers are highlighting in spring training, and apparently that pitch has been particularly nasty. So in terms of the pitchers, I think those three guys are guys that they can lean on throughout the season. Obviously, guys like Logan Henderson, Chad Patrick in the mix as well to be options in the starting rotation. So they've built the depth there. And then in terms of the position players, we said health is the number one thing on the bulletin board at the beginning of the season. The number two thing is who can win the Vinny Capra annual Cactus League Standout Player of the Year award. You know what? Brandon Lockridge was really trending well on that until he, I guess, jammed his rotator cuff. And then Tyler Black was trending very well as well. But now he's with Team Canada. So who is going to fill that vacuum? So those would be my 5 standouts early.
So that's great.
But to the point on what I've called all spring training is the Brewers have a bag of prospects. They just have they're walking around with a bag of them. This isn't we have 2 or 3. We have so many. I'm not even going to say the number. They're just all hanging out in a bag. But the guys that we're talking about, Lockridge, Black, these guys, they weren't on the radar. These weren't guys that they were in the bag of prospects. Sure, right? Anyone really who wasn't already slotted in to be a starter on the team, I'm going to consider a prospect, but they weren't guys I was going to have to worry about. And now I'm going, do I still? And if not, should the Brewers be doing something? Is it possible we have too many prospects? And instead of always looking at bites of the apple and the future and everything else, then maybe we should bundle some of these guys to try to get a bigger name, get a bigger bat, do something.
Well, that was going to be my next question in terms of bundling. I guess my real question is, how real do we think Tyler Black's production in this specific spring training is, right? Because I feel like there's been huge conversations about he's been on the outside looking in, and at one point does his value become more appealing to a team that can actually make space for him versus a Brewers team that could use him if he plays at this level. But to Josh's point, with the amount of guys coming up the pipeline, especially when we look at like 27 and further down the road, like, is his time with the Brewers, does it make sense to call him up, package him up? What do you think? How real is his production this season or this camp?
I think he's a guy they probably should move at some point just because the positional fit doesn't really make sense for their roster. He's been playing second base for Canada because they're just basically a nation of first basemen right now. So they're just throwing guys in there. Can you imagine if they had Freddie Freeman? It would be all first basemen. And the hit tool and his approach at the plate both could be very real and could be things that take a step up this year. I think in the ABS system, he's a guy who's spent time with that at the minor league level, has a great eye at the plate, who could be someone that racks up challenge wins like crazy if he does get significant big league time this year. There's just probably no path to him making the opening day roster. So he's got options still, so he can go to Nashville and continue to play. But what is he really learning there? So I think it's a situation where he will be at Nashville to start the season. If there is a void somewhere at first base, maybe he can find his way back in. Maybe get some at-bats at designated hitter, but he does need to play at the big league level at some point. If he could have made third base work and the throwing arm was something that could play there, that would have been ideal, but that really just didn't pan out. As far as Lockridge, I think he's a very interesting name that we bring up because Garrett Mitchell in an ideal world would be slotted in to be your everyday center fielder, but he has not shown an ability to stay healthy. Could he benefit from starting in Nashville and you work out, Blake Perkins and Lockridge at the big league level to give him a chance to do that? Or do you just want to not waste any bullets with Mitchell and say, let's start you from day one and see how long it lasts? And Lockridge is a break glass in case of emergency guy. So with Lockridge, I think there is something that the Brewers see there that maybe we didn't see when they acquired him. I mean, they traded Nestor Cortez to the Padres. They attached a prospect who a lot of people like. Haven't kept track of how he's doing in the Padres organization, but they clearly valued getting Lockridge back in return. And at the very least, as a 4th, 5th outfielder, base runner, defensive replacement, and a guy with some pop there trying to unlock, I think he's someone that will factor into the big league roster, at least at some point this year, especially if Mitchell, again, can't stay healthy, or if, like Tyler Black, they try to flip Blake Perkins for something they need down the line.
So I think an interesting wrinkle to this, too, is that bag of prospects that you already know you have, right? When they look at Made and, Jet Williams, who they just got, and some of these other guys, I feel like they're committed to those guys being on this roster at some point. So then you have these other names like Black, like Lockridge, that you're going, okay, even if these guys prove themselves, now they need to find a space for them, or the only time they're going to see in the majors in a Brewers uniform would be if things fall apart due to injury, and then you need to call these guys up. And so I really wonder too, guys, if it comes down to, do the Brewers just kind of hold on to these guys and wait until maybe closer to a trade deadline? I mean, they can technically trade them at any point throughout the season to try to bundle something else up when they know an immediate need. Because I feel like right now in camp, they have a plethora of people. It's very strange. When we went into camp, we were asking the question, who's on third? Who's playing third base? And now I feel like the questions are answered. Like we don't necessarily have a lot of question marks out there of who's going to play, who's going to start, who's going to be the guys to start the season. It really just comes down to now of, all right, at what point did the Brewers make a move? And are they already set? Let's talk about that on the other side when we come back, of just what this Brewers team out of camp is going to look like. And maybe that'll answer some of the questions about what the Brewers will end up doing with some of those prospects that they're going to end up keeping down in AAA. All right. Thank you for joining us, Andrew. Stick with us. We'll be right back on Don't Tell Me How to Fan. Welcome back, everyone, to Don't Tell Me How to Fan. I'm Josh Albrecht, John Taylor, as always, alongside, and Andrew Snyder joining us, friend of the Eurostep Network, and as I'm calling him, the knower of baseball, that is. We're talking all things Brewers today. We're very excited to do so, as the Brewers are having fun in spring training. We just got done talking about how things are going in spring training, our thoughts on the prospects and who are making names for themselves down there. But let's transition a little bit to what we're expecting out of the guys we know are going to be playing at the end of March for opening day in a Brewers uniform. So first and foremost, Andrew, is there one guy more than the rest that you expect to see a big increase in production this year from last year?
Yeah, the guy I'm looking at this year, and he had a good season last year by most measures, but a down season from his previous 2 seasons, is William Contreras. And that's because last season, as we know, he was playing with a hurt finger for the majority of the season. His first 2 years with the Brewers, first season 825 OPS, second season 831 OPS, last year dipped to 754 because of that finger injury. So if he can dip into a little bit more of that home run power that he showed in 2024 when he hit 23 homers, I think he's going to have a massive year. Obviously, the Brewers brought back Gary Sanchez as a veteran backup catcher. They've also got Jefferson Caro, who should start the season at Nashville, who could eventually be up with the big league club to spell him time and potentially, save his body a little bit, maybe get him some DH at bats. So I think we're going to have a monster bounce back year for William Contreras. And obviously that would take him going into the final season of his club control with the Brewers. So would invite a lot of questions we won't talk about until later and until we have to. But going into that year, I think you're going to see him motivated and ready to just raise his game back up to the level we know it can be for William Contreras.
All right, then let me ask you about a few other names that are making headlines. So before we get to the big one, what about Andrew Vaughn? How does Vaughn do this year?
So if you'll ask people that think the Brewers are going to take a step back this season, a lot of that comes down to Andrew Vaughn and the assumption that he's going to regress because he had not done with what he had done with the Brewers before. He had a couple of good seasons to start his career, or I guess I'll call them competent seasons because they weren't great seasons with the White Sox, but he did have a 111 OPS plus in 2022, 102 in 2023. So he was above league average. Last year, that second half of the Brewers, clearly the best season of his career. So he could regress, but also the one thing the Brewers really honed in on with him was his swing decisions. Not swinging at balls, swinging at strikes, but more importantly, swinging at pitches you can do damage on. So it sounds very simple, but for some reason, that really clicked with Andrew Vaughn last season. He's not old by any means. I believe this is going to be his age 28 season in 2026. So he seems to be a guy that's really just finally in the right organization and clicking on at the right time. So I'm optimistic with him, and that's also because they have a natural platoon with him if it doesn't go well. Another guy that had a breakout last season to a degree was Jake Bauers. He hits really well against right-handed pitching. So the worst case, if Vaughn is slumping against right-handers like he had in the past, you work out a platoon, Vaughn against left-handers, Jake Bauers against right-handers, and I think you can cover yourself that way. So I'm is it bullish or bears? I'm positive on Andrew Vaughn.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question. Do you think the Brewers are heading into the season saying like Andrew Vaughn is our no doubt first baseman, and when he needs a break, or if or if it's like a right-handed like dominant like lineup like you're talking about pitchers, or do we think it's going to be more of a platoon situation? Because I feel like the Brewers in the past, it's been very clear. We're like, just play the guy. And they're like, we're playing matchups. We play matchups. We're going to continue to look at matchups. And I wonder if Vaughn produced enough last year to have them confidently say, like, that's our first baseman? Or do you keep a guy like Jake Bauers in the fold because obviously he can provide something that Vaughn, historically has not been great against, which is, the right-handers?
It's been my assumption that they'll ride with Vaughn at the very least to start the season. Obviously, I'm not in camp getting those answers from Murph himself, but he seems to be a guy that once he buys into you and believes in you, he will give you a chance to keep it going until you don't earn the chance to keep playing. I think it is just a good emergency option, or not really emergency option, but Bauers will get at bats here and there. You can maybe get him DH at bats too if you're giving Yelich a day off, and God forbid if Yelich is in the outfield, because I think they want to save his body as much as possible and not see that anymore. I really just think it's good depth and good coverage. That's the one thing I think the Brewers have done pretty well in this offseason is building organizational depth, even if it's not necessarily overwhelming in terms of star power.
Yeah, that's a big thing I'm always curious about with the William Contreras conversation is like, well, they signed Sanchez back, and I think Caro, it's like pretty obvious it's just a matter of time. They do not want to start his clock until they absolutely have to, because
he needs to stay healthy too.
Yeah, but it's like you're going to keep Contreras until you can. So why start his heir apparent's clock earlier than you have to. Like, I understand that, but the conversations about DH are always interesting to me because it's just like, it's so obvious to me that Yelly can't play meaningful time in the outfield, especially when you look at like the list of guys, right? Like, obviously you want Jackson Chourio in left. He's proved to be serviceable at center, but I think like, I think it's not it's not the most natural. Clearly, we all agree he should be in left field. And then you look at guys like Garrett Mitchell, Brandon Lockridge, to your point, who is a speedy defender. Like, I think he is definitely good out in the middle of the infield. And then obviously Sal just is going to be your right fielder all day long unless he's injured. Like, I do wonder at some point. I'm always very curious about how do they actually manage these guys who you can just say like, oh, we'll just put him at the DH, but it just doesn't happen that way. Like, I think about like even like Reese, where it was like, well, if he can't play first, like he'll DH. It's like, well, he found his way to not playing after being perfectly healthy. As recently talking about that with like his new Guardian stand. Like, it just got to a spot where we just didn't have a place for him, and I'm always curious about who gets squeezed and how, and to what ill consequence might that have for the Brewers. If William Contreras can only play catcher for 162 games, he's going to play catcher. That's the kind of guy he is. He's shown that, right? And that's like why he didn't stay last year. And I guess this isn't really as a question, but it's more just like this thought that like, I do sometimes wonder, it's like the gamesmanship of the Brewers maybe outmatches their number of plays to play, right? Like they have more cards up their sleeve than cards in their hand. And I do wonder if like, okay, so what does actually shake out? And sadly, the I'm probably answering my own question. It's probably injuries. Injuries probably make this, unfortunately, all make a lot more sense, and it seems to happen every year.
That's part of it. I think injuries are part of it, but I think you also brought up matchups. Like, they're a team that's going to play to matchups, and that can be frustrating as a fan because you're like, no, play the hot hand. Why this guy's crushing? Why are you don't take him out? But then that's the thing, is that then Murph and this team go and win 97 games. And then you go, oh, well, all right, well, what the hell do I know? Good thing you're getting paid to do it and not me. And that's just part of being a fan. It's having that opinion and then realizing that's not always – they know. They know better than us, even though that might not be exactly the move we'd make.
Right, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. I got a fun little question. I got
one more.
Oh, please. Absolutely.
Let's talk about Joey Ortiz. A lot of people talking about Joey Ortiz. I thought before spring training, hey, we got Jet Williams. Like, this is essentially Joey Ortiz. Thanks. We'll see you later. Like, they got a guy. Now he's got a beard. Now they're saying like, hey, look at, whatever, 107 off his bat. He had a 3-for-3 day at camp. And a lot of people, including my boy Tim Allen, are saying we're right back on. He's all in on Joey Ortiz this year. I'm not there. I can't be there. I'm sorry. I'm the guy. I'm like, you got to prove it to me when it counts. But where are you guys at on Joey Ortiz as we inch closer to the season?
I'm lukewarm, but cautiously optimistic, or at the very least, I understand the process. Because according to outs above average, and I'm going to call it the eye test because I think everyone that watched him for 162 last year believe he's a very, very good defensive shortstop. Mm-hmm. So you've got pitching and defense, something the Brewers value completely. They're going to keep him there unless they have someone knocking down the door to take the job from him. And on the free agent market, in the trade market, you just weren't going to be able to find a shortstop of similar defensive quality to replace him. It just wasn't going to happen. In his first season with the Brewers, he was a slightly above league average bat and well above that before he hurt his neck. I thought we were in for a breakout season last year, and it went in the tank completely, and it just lost it completely. So I'm for Joey Ortiz remaining in the plans with a short leash. If it gets into the middle of the season and it's not going well, and Jet Williams is playing well in Nashville, and you're saying, wow, he can play shortstop. He's a shortstop. He can do it. Or at the very least, he can get you through the season. Or Cooper Pratt's knocking down the door. I think you shouldn't hesitate to make that move. But I understand not doing it right away. I mean, it's 162 games of baseball, so you're going to have guys that aren't necessarily the optimal players at that position playing some games throughout the year. That's just going to happen. I mean, Benny Capra started opening day at Yankee Stadium, hit a home run, and then we didn't hear from him again after 3 weeks, and now I think he's in the Red Sox organization. So that's going to happen. And when it's someone that has a glove like Joey has, I think you can get by as long as guys elsewhere in the lineup are doing their part. But if it reaches that breaking point, I think you make the move and you switch.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in. My follow-up question to that is, he was recently, I was at Brewers All Access. He was talking to Dom Cotroneo. He did an interview and he was saying like, I think like the biggest thing, and you could see it on Murph's face, and he talked about a lot of it was just swing decisions, right? And it's like, how much do you think like, and you're not a pro or an ex-pro, so we're just talking, but I do wonder how much can you actually change swing decisions this late into your MLB career? And I know that like, this will be his like what, 4th full season, 3rd with the Brewers, right? Like, or
Yep.
pretty close.
Yeah.
Like I start to wonder at what point does potential meet performance, and is that something that really can get fixed in a quick enough time that would actually yield offensive results? Because I know when we got him 2 seasons ago, he was swinging the bat way better than he did last year. Like you said, like not only did everyone go into last year thinking he might get better, he got several steps worse, and now he's climbing just to get back to where he was. And I wonder at what point do the Brewers say, we got to figure something else out? And to your point, he's elite defensively, so he's going to have a longer leash than most people, at least in the Brewers organization, right? Because that's obviously the number one thing they're going to prioritize. But that is a position I continually go like, we keep talking about Josh's bag of prospects, them who shan't be named, but it's like at some point, is that a position you can look into
Right.
on a short-term rental if you're like really considering what it looks like? But he's the most highly talked about player on the Brewers roster, and unfortunately, I think it's totally warranted because he does so much right, but the stuff he does wrong is so wrong.
And here's the thing that I brought up with him too, and then Andrew will we'll let you talk too. But is that it's not just the numbers for him. It goes back to the scar tissue as a fan. The first time that Joey Ortiz steps to the plate and the bases are loaded this year, I promise you, my heart rate will increase severely. It's about if he batted, if he put up 240, 230, but he was clutch, if his RBIs were up severely, I don't think people would mind as much because he has the glove. It's the fact that he's not batting 265 and then failing with bases loaded. It's that all he has right now is kind of the glove. And that's the problem. And so I don't necessarily need him to just hit better. I'd like that. But if he's not going to hit better all the time, at least be more clutch. I need that clutch gene to come in when the opportunity presents itself. Can't be to where pitchers are walking the guy before him going, well, I got Ortiz next, and he's 0 for 100 with the bases loaded. Like, we just can't have those type of situations. And that, unfortunately, I think is what Ortiz is up against.
Yeah, that was a real ball will find you situation when things aren't going well. It seemed like he had 6,000 plate appearances with the bases loaded last year, and didn't come through in any of them. I think it's just the toughest position on the field to marry everything together. Everyone on their high school team, the best players are shortstop up into college, and then those guys get drafted, and then you have 10 shortstops in the organization, and 90% of them move to other positions, and the ones that stick, those are the guys, and the ones that stick and hit like a Willie Adames, those are the ones you just cherish and remember. And that's the thing about Willie, is that with Willie Adames at the plate in a big situation, there was no doubt in your mind that he was a guy that was going to come through. So when you're making that direct comparison between him and Joey, it's tough. And it's funny because the options they would have to replace him, I think we're going to be asking the same questions, like a Cooper Pratt. Is he going to have enough power? Is the hit going to be there? Mm-hmm. Jet Williams, can he play shortstop? But if one of these guys comes up, and it's not great, it's lackluster numbers, but to your point, Josh, if he's coming up to the plate with the bases loaded and he's hitting some flares into right field, driving runs in big situations, the fans aren't going to care. They're just going to love it because it's different than what we had.
I'd kill for a Joey Ortiz sacrifice fly. Put me on wax.
Loaded one out, you bet. Yeah. Just get it out there, Joey. All right, we got to take another break. When we come back, John has some more fun things we're going to run through with Andrew here on Don't Tell Me How to Fan. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone, to Don't Tell Me How to Fan. Josh Albrecht, John Taylor, our guest Andrew Snyder joining us on today's show. Very happy to have you on. All right, let's continue the conversation. We're talking all things Brewers. We're having a lot of fun.
Yeah. Hey, Andrew, I just want to shift gears a little bit again here. I'm curious about, I guess this is where we're going to do our little preseason. It's a little early. I know that, but since we have you here, I want to take advantage of it. I'm curious about some things you think that they're going to do well this year that's going to help win us the Central again, and some things that you think might stand in the way or make that more challenging as, the Cubs, the Reds, and hell, even the Pirates seem to be fielding better rosters this year than years past. So just starting off first, I'm curious your thoughts on let's say three things you think the Brewers are going to nail to help make sure they win the Central again.
Number one for me is building that pitching depth. You brought back Brandon Woodruff with the qualifying offer, but you did trade Freddie Peralta. Woodruff's health is always going to be a question. So it's important that you have depth around him. Same with Quinn Priester. You've got Miz in year 2. He's going to have to increase his innings this season. And will that take an adjustment? It might. We saw him have to go on the IL last season. It was because he got hit with a comebacker, but I think really the Brewers just wanted to buy him some rest in his rookie season. And then you've got guys like Chad Patrick, who blew up last year, that I think will be people that will get out to the big league level a lot this year. Shane Drowan, who we already talked about, Kyle Harrison, Brandon Sproat, Logan Henderson, later down the road, maybe in a year or two, Bishop Letson. They've just got pitching depth and starting pitching depth up and down this organization. Robert Gasser is a guy we even forget to mention because he missed all that time after undergoing TJ, but he is an option to come in and get outs. And in the bullpen, Rob Zastryzny, Grant Anderson, DL Hall, Angel Zerpa, Coleman Crow, Craig Yoho, Easton McGee, Jacob Wog's back, Peter Strzelecki's back, Trevor McGill's back, Abner Uribe. They've just got so much pitching and so many options so that getting through the war of attrition that is 162 games in Major League Baseball, they've got the option there. So that's number one. The other thing is another thing that Josh mentioned. It is the rookies on deck that are ready and waiting to come up when there are situations where people may need to be replaced. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Luis Rengifo is going to come in and be an adequate replacement for Caleb Durbin, as he had done for most of his career until last year. But you've also got guys like Brock Wilken, who this is a big year for him after being one of the unluckiest men in minor league baseball with the injuries he accrued over the last 2 years. Could be an option at third base at some point. Andrew Fisher is a hot prospect at third base as well. Probably not ready this year, but he's a college bat. College bats can move fast, especially one that played 2 seasons in the SEC and 1 in the ACC. Transfer portal era guys get around. And I think the third one for me is continuity. And it's Murphy being back, Chris Hook being back. Obviously, Ricky Weeks has moved to a different role, and you've got some shifts out in the coaching staff. But I think reducing the brain drain, specifically with the pitching and Chris Hook and Jim Henderson, and then Pat Murphy keeping everything steady and ready to go. I think those are the 3 secret sauces that I think will keep the train moving on the tracks, because you may be worried about some offensive regression or injuries to the pitching staff, but building in that depth in terms of the pitching and then giving yourself options throughout the organization, not just on the major league roster when it comes to offensive position players, I think that can help offset a lot of the concerns we might have.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like the Brewers, during Matt Arnold and the rest of the organization during the offseason looked at what happened last year and went, we will not be in the position to where we're not ready if someone gets hurt. We refuse to let ourselves go into this pulling at whoever's available. We will have guys lined up ready to fill those spots. That's the one thing I'm most certain and comfortable with this team is they have guys. I don't know how good those guys are going to be, but they have guys.
Well, it's also similar to what we have conversations about, like, they'll play their matchups. They want defense. They know what they want. It's like, they also won't make moves out of desperation. Like, they just won't do that. You know what I mean? They like their prospects too much. And I think this offseason, whether what you brought up, Josh, is like, we won't let this happen again. There's also this really natural process where they're also very happy to let guys go if they think they're going to regress. We didn't even talk about Isaac Collins and, that trade that happened so early in the offseason that it's almost, Angel Zerpa is, he's like old news at this point because the Brewers actually signed 3 guys this offseason, right? It's like the stove got so hot. Yeah, we forgot. Yeah. But I think that's really interesting. Is there any prospect? I think, like, obviously, like, Jet Williams seems like the most obvious answer, but is there any, like, kind of like down the barrel prospect you think that could maybe surprise us by the end of the year maybe through play, and hopefully that's what the answer, because the other one would be injuries and circumstance, and that one's less fun. But is there a guy you think in the minors that could find its way to, like end of summer extended roster and maybe make their way onto the Brewers roster next year faster than you were expecting?
I think the guy that keeps coming to my mind is Brock Wilken, if Andrew Vaughn regresses, because he's been playing some first base in spring training. That should be something he could be expected to do. And we talk about Pratt, we talk about Mate, but he might be legitimately the first guy also called in if Rengifo struggles. And if that's just like, oh, it wasn't just a 1 year blip, he's completely gone. I think if Brock Wilken's healthy, he will be patient and he will hit for power. He can probably play a serviceable third base from what I've read from the guys that know prospects better than me. And that could be enough in a pinch if they need him. So he could be that option. Another guy back in the pitching side of things is Coleman Crow. Not necessarily a guy that's going to blow you away with stuff, but he spins it really well. And he's a guy that could be in a multi-inning relief role who was added to the 40-man in this offseason. And I don't think he's gotten a ton of shine when we talk about all the depth that we just ran through, but he's a guy who could get out to the big league level this year for sure.
Yeah. Something I'm definitely excited about is I feel like the recipe, while it was very special last year, I think it is pretty replicable. I think the Brewers can do it again. To a degree in which that will be easy is up for debate. But like you said, the consistency of the coaching staff, by and large, the team is pretty much the same, right? It's like you traded some sacrifice to try to upgrade in other areas. But when you talk about a team that's going to be defensive first, they're going to put balls in play a lot. They're going to force you to play defense better than most teams can actually, produce on the field. And they're going to small ball you to death. That should be doable this year. I guess that's a nice transition to my next question is Pacoda has the Brewers going 500, 81-81. And I know that there has been enough reported that their metrics just don't really take into account what the Brewers do well. I'm curious, if the Brewers were to lose the Central and we see a step back, what do you think happened to them this year that kept them from, and I don't think 97 wins is repeatable, but success is obviously a swinging a sliding scale metric.
Yeah, I was thinking about this when I was listening to the Jonathan Judge podcast that he talked about when he went on with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel a few weeks ago. And it referred me back to a Substack article from Sam Miller. His Substack's called Pebble Hunting. He's a great baseball writer, been doing this a number of years, written at least one book, maybe a couple, I can't remember. And two things that he added about why he doubted their offense on August 19th last year. This had come after Burgers and the end of that winning streak. He wrote that, one, many of their hitters who are hitting well haven't previously hit well, so for now I expect them to regress. And number two, their underlying metrics, their batted ball data, don't suggest a modern offensive overwhelming team. They hit a lot of ground balls, and they turned a lot of those ground balls into errors by their opposition last year, and we just don't know how sustainable that's going to be year over year. So that would be my only worry. Like you said, the swing decisions and the decision to not swing, which is one thing the Brewers do incredibly well. A lot of people don't realize this. Swinging is often very bad. And the Brewers, do it in the right times. And last season, when they did swing and put the ball in play, good things happen by way of base hits, not a massive amount of home runs, but also just by forcing the defense to make plays, and the defense were making plays. And that speaks to Pat Murphy's win tonight sort of mentality. A lot of people have been asking a question, are they going to burn out hot and bright every year in the playoffs because of that? If they burn out hot and bright in the NLCS every year, I'll take it. So if they want to keep doing that. But that is possible, and those are things that could lead to a regression. If a lot of those balls in play this year are turned into outs rather than errors or base hits, a little bit of offensive regression should see them come back to the pack. And again, we said it for the umpteenth time, I do have a little bit of worry about Brandon Woodruff's health holding up over a full season. And you've got the depth to make up for it, but that is counting on a lot of guys who have not put together full regular season workloads of starting pitching in the majors. And you hope to offset that with volume, but it is a very real concern on both the offensive and the pitching side.
I don't think go ahead.
I was gonna say, John, you brought up too, about just what would be the reason if the Brewers don't win the Central. And part of me was it might just be that the Cubs beat them by a game. Like the Cubs still won 92 games last year. They still had a really, really good season. The Brewers just had their best season. And the Cubs went and they spent money and they got players. And so I expect it to be a very tight, very competitive season between these two teams. And it might just be that the Cubs are a few games better going, into the postseason this year. And it might just end up that the Brewers are a wild card. I do not expect them to not make it. If they, you put your faith in Matt Arnold and in Pat Murphy for them to do what they do. I don't know how anyone could doubt that at this point. And so I expect them to continue to do so. But as far as the Central, to me, it's kind of a coin flip. It's, the Cubs did work. They did work to try to go, we were this close. We got the money. We got to get past Milwaukee.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely found themselves with a nice little target on their back the way they've been winning the Central over the last several years, especially not being an in vogue style of play like you had mentioned, Andrew, with the way they don't really produce home runs. I was going to ask you, what do you think? What's the target? I don't think Brandon Woodruff is going to pitch every game he could, right? Around that 20 start mark feels to me like if we could get 20 strong starts out of Brandon Woodruff, that would be one hell of a return to form season for him. Is that too low, or do you think that sounds right? I guess it's hard because I'm looking at like a guy like Freddie who just pitched forever and ever and ever until we told him he couldn't be a Brewer anymore. I'm wondering what you think a good meeting in the middle of what we as fans want out of Woodruff, which is obviously dominating starts the entire season, versus like what we think is realistic so he can actually go in the offseason or in the postseason this year.
Yeah, that's tough. So in 2023, he only threw 67 innings. It's easy to forget. And I think he was coming back and then got hurt right before the playoffs. Didn't play in 2024 because of injuries, and then 64 and 2/3 innings last year. Honestly, if he gets over 100 into that 120 win area and has to miss inning area and has to miss some time on the IL just in terms of load management, we'll call it, to borrow from the NBA, then honestly, I would take that as long as the kids around him are making up for it. So yeah. I would consider that a win. If they're an NL Central winner, he gives you 120-ish innings, and then also he's healthy for the playoffs, because I think that's a big thing as well.
Yeah, I was going to say I would take 10 of those 20 if we could guarantee they were in the playoffs. Hell, I would take 15 starts if 10 of those were in the playoffs. It's not enough, but you get my point. Like that's kind of where I'm at with Woodruff at this point. Like I think his stuff is nasty, even with like the drop in velo. Like the fact that he was still able to go out there and find ways to make outs consistently. He's still an ace. I still, like I said, I say this almost every episode when we talk Brewers. Like he was my pick over Burns always, and so even with the injury history, I'm gonna root for that dude every day of the week until he just like can't throw with his right arm anymore. So
I do have to say, I think it's important that he stays healthy for more than just him being on the mound, but he is the veteran leadership. He is the veteran leadership on a team of prospects and young guns. He's the guy, right? And so they need him to still be a voice in the clubhouse. It can't be a guy that he gets sidelined for months and he's spending time in Nashville or even in Appleton or wherever doing rehab stints. Like you need him in the clubhouse helping these guys for the future too. That's going to be a big part of him being on the team. So to your point, John, even if it isn't to where he's pitching every fifth day, having him be there, I think is really going to help this team. And time will tell. Time will also tell on how often we can convince Andrew to come back. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us for this episode of Don't Tell Me How to Fan. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
All right, and thank you so much to everyone for listening. And as always, we hope that you are here next time because we are not done yet.